Hello, Heebie-Jeepsters! Welcome back to another episode on Heebie-Jeebies TV. So, today's episode is going to be a little bit delicate. So before we get started, I just wanted to say that if you're sensitive to any topics involving death or mental health issues, it would be best if you were to click out of this video and join us on our next one because it is particularly sensitive. It is in regards to the Elisa Lam story. So this is a very, very famous story, and on top of the warning discretion, I also wanted to say that we mean no disrespect to Elisa Lam and her family. We are just trying to look into the evidence regarding this story because it's really one of the biggest mysteries that have been happening in the past few years. To this day, it's still a mystery. Okay, so to begin, Elisa Lam was born April 30th, 1991 in British Columbia. She was of Chinese descent. She was also a student at the University of British Columbia. Her family and her childhood upbringing was fairly normal, nothing too crazy. However, her parents were a little bit more on the conservative side. They took an extreme priority in always keeping an eye on her, making sure that she would continue in her studies, and so on and so forth. So while she was in university, she decided to take a little bit of a break and go to Los Angeles for about a week just to cool off, take a vacation. But her parents were very reluctant to let her go on this vacation because, again, they were very concerned about her. And of course, given the fact that she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, they wanted to keep a close eye on her and make sure that she was okay and taking her medications, etc., etc. Nevertheless, with their worries and reluctance, they did let her go. She ended up going on January 26th. And she actually disappeared about 4 days later, which was pretty concerning. And this is where the whole story began. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a brief summary of what the story actually entailed, or the mystery actually entailed, if I should say it that way. So what ended up happening was on January 31st, 4 days after she had left for her vacation, Elisa never ended up checking with her parents, and that was part of the agreement that they actually made together to make sure that she would check in with them every single day. So that they would know that she was safe. So on this day, she didn't check in. Of course, they were extremely concerned, found it very unusual, and they ended up calling LAPD and booked the first flight out. So for almost 3 weeks, she was nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be found. The only type of evidence that they had, or lead that they had, was the CCTV footage from the hotel where she was staying at, which actually confused people even more. And once it was released to the public, there was just a bunch of conspiracy theories, and people were just left in awe and disbelief as to what may have happened or what did actually happen. It was very bizarre. So it wasn't until February 19th that she was actually discovered, and this is actually very disturbing. How they actually ended up finding her was because the people who were the guests who were staying at the hotel, they started to complain that there was black water coming out of their faucets, like from the sink and from the showers. And then they started saying that the water had an unusual smell and taste. And the reason why I'm reacting like this, you will soon find out. So they ended up going to check the water supply, and then they found her in the water tank. So essentially what all of these guests were smelling and tasting and seeing in the black water was her decomposing body in the water tank. Yes, I know, it's horrid. Like, what a way to find out that somebody had passed. It's very disturbing. So they found her naked with her clothes floating next to her inside the tank, and because she had been in the tank for almost 3 weeks, her body was severely bloated and almost unrecognizable. She was severely discolored. If you end up seeing people who were found after the fact from drowning and they were left in the water, they bloat up. Your body just soaks up all of the water, and sometimes the eyes. A little bit too much information, but anyways, yes, so they ended up finding her in the water tank supply. So now that you have a little bit of a rundown of the story, we can start getting into the details. Elisa Lam checked into the hotel called Cecil. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'm very horrible with pronunciations. It's spelled Cecil Hotel. And for those of you that don't know it, this hotel actually has a long history of murders happening in there, crimes, suicides, just a lot of deaths and violence happening in there. And it really doesn't help that this hotel is actually located in downtown LA, which is a very close area to what a lot of people know to be a crime-enriched area. So what is the history of this mysterious crime-enriched hotel, the Cecil Hotel? Okay, so what happened? I'm going to have to read all of this information. I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit bland, but there's a lot of dates and infos that I just cannot memorize at the top of my head. Okay, so it was founded in 1927. Things didn't really start happening until 1931 when a man named W.K. Norton actually committed suicide. A list of things started happening soon after this suicide. Like, of course, it's not uncommon that things like that happen in hotels. Some people like to be alone in those types of situations. But anyways, nevertheless, let's go back to the list. So, 1932, Benjamin Dodich committed suicide. 1934, Sergeant Louis D. Borden was found murdered in his room. 1937, Grace Margot fell out of her room window. It's not known if she was killed or if she committed suicide. They were never able to determine that. And also given that it's back in 1937, it's hard to gather up evidence. They didn't have any of the forensic things that we have now. 1938, Roy Thompson committed suicide by jumping off of the top floor. 1939, Erwin Neblett was found dead in his room from poison ingestion. 1940, Dorothy Seger, again, horrible with pronunciation. I'm sorry, Dorothy. She was found dying in her room, also from poison. She ended up dying at the hospital after the fact. 1944, Dorothy Purcell gave birth to her baby in the bathroom of her room, and then she threw the baby out the window because apparently she thought that it was a stillborn. That's really sad. That's really sad. 1954, Helen Gurney, she jumped out of her window. 1962, Julia Moore and Pauline Oten also jumped out of their windows. 1975, an unidentified woman jumped out of her window as well. 1992, an unidentified man was either pushed or he jumped out of the window. That was never determined as well. 2013, Elisa Lam was found, and in 2015, an unnamed man jumped out of his window as well. So that is a lot that had happened, and those are only the cases that we were able to find, so you can only imagine what else may have happened there. It's also reported that the Cecil Hotel was the last place that the Black Dahlia was seen, and this is a very famous unsolved case that has sparked dozens of theories since the 1947. It's also said that the famous Night Stalker, there was a docuseries released on Netflix not too long ago on the Night Stalker. For those of you who don't know who he was a serial killer in the 70s, I believe it was, and he actually ended up brutally raping and murdering several women and children. It is said that the Night Stalker would hide out and live at the Cecil Hotel during his murdering sprees in 1985. Yes, so he was on quite a spree for quite a long time. To this day, it's unknown what has really been making people commit suicide in this hotel or driving them to jump out the window or to ingest poison, or what's making killers come to this hotel. Like, is it just one of those hotels where it's easy to hide out in because it's in a bad area, or is it because it's in a bad area a lot of people go there and they end up doing horrid things? I don't know. Okay, now that you have a little bit of history as to the weird things, yeah, I'm weird too, sorry. Now you have a little bit of history as to the weird things that happened in the hotel. We'll go back to the Elisa Lam story. So after she didn't contact her parents on January 31st, of course, they ended up flying out there, and they also had recovered the CCTV footage from the hotel. So this is where it gets really, really weird, because the way that she was behaving on camera, or the video footage that they ended up finding, was very, very bizarre. She seemed like she was hiding from someone or running. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to jump to the theories just yet. I'll let you guys look at the video and tell us what you think. that was super creepy. I don't know what you guys think, but creepy, bizarre, weird, like it just makes you say, what's happening? Like, what is she doing? Is she hiding from someone? So you see her, she's in the elevator of the hotel, but you can look by her body language. Something is very, very off. She seems like she is looking at something, but also trying to hide at the same time. She's crouching down, pressing all the buttons while trying to hide too. She backs up for a little bit into the far corner and then walks towards the door. She's sticking her head out as if she's checking to see if someone's coming or someone's not coming, while also trying to check the buttons. But in the video, we can't see anything. This is what makes it a little bit creepy and bizarre as well, that there's like no one in the hallway that we can actually see. It's just from her behaviors. And then it also looks like she ends up getting startled by something, because she jumps back at one point as if either she heard something or she thought something was coming near her. Who knows? So she ends up pressing herself to the back of the elevator, and then she does the same thing again for another couple of times, and then she sticks out her head again to see if anyone's coming there. But then at this time, she seems to be talking to someone once she's sticking out her head out of the elevator again. Who she's talking to, again, I don't know. We don't have that visibility. It's a little bit strange. So she continues the same pattern of jumping back, crouching down, pressing the elevator buttons, poking her head out of the elevator doors to see. And then she eventually steps out of the elevator, and then you can actually see that she's talking to someone. Like, that part is pretty obvious and visible because she's moving her arms and she's gesturing, kind of like how I do. Yeah, she's gesturing, like if she were to be having a conversation with someone. So then she ends up walking out of the elevator completely and then walks into the hallway, and then they never see her again, unfortunately, which is the really sad part about this whole story. The last footage that we have of her is acting bizarre, scared, very different, and then she's never seen again. So it's almost sad to think that in her last moments she was in a lot of fear. It's really sad. Sorry, Elisa. So like we mentioned earlier, the last footage of Elisa was of her there in the elevator, and there was no sign of her afterwards at all throughout the entire hotel after she left the elevator into the hallway. And again, it wasn't until 3 weeks after that date on the video that they ended up finding her, only because of the complaints that they received from the other guests about the water. So actually a woman ended up speaking out to CNN. Her name was Sabrina Bao, and I'm going to actually read the quote that she said. "The water did have a funny taste. We never thought anything of it. We thought it was just the way it was here. The shower was awful. When you turned on the tap, the water was coming black for the first 2 seconds and then going back to normal." I don't know. When it gives me the heebie-jeebies. No, I'm joking. But yeah, it's just to imagine that you have been showering in this water, potentially drinking this water, brushing your teeth with this water, and to know that there was a rotting body in there. It's just a decomposing body. Very disturbing. It wasn't until a few days after that she was found that the LA's coroner office released the results of the autopsy. They actually ended up saying that the cause of death was by drowning, and they were saying that the cause of the drowning was due to her bipolar disorder. So being in the healthcare field, I'm trying to think how that might have been a cause, because just because you have bipolar disorder, it doesn't mean that you're like unable to think or immobile or anything like that. And she was taking her medication regularly too. So I don't know how they think that might have been a cause. Like, the only way that I think she might have been incapacitated was if she was in some type of psychosis at the time. And for people who have bipolar disorder, like, it takes quite a fair amount to get there, or maybe the mix of other medications or drugs to be able to trigger someone to go into psychosis like that, to not be able to do anything for themselves, to not be able to take care of them for themselves. So that's very, very strange. So yes, they said it was an accidental drowning and that it was because of her bipolar disorder. And then toxicology reports actually say that there were traces of prescription medications and non-prescription medications. No recreational drugs whatsoever, but they did find a little bit of alcohol too. Okay, so here is where all of the questions arise as to who, what, where, when, why, and how. More specifically, how. Really weird circumstances. So first off, the access to the roof, it is locked at all times, according to the staff. They say that the only way that anyone would have access to it would be with an employee access code. And they say that the guests do not have access to this whatsoever. So how did she get up there? Secondly, she was found in the water tank. The water tank is 8 feet tall. There are no ladders surrounding the water tank. So how did she get up there? Okay, let's say she somehow ended up climbing up there. Let's say she gets on there and she's holding onto the side of the tank. The lid is super, super heavy. So how are you going to be holding yourself up in a very weird way, holding up this very large lid and throwing yourself into the water tank? So for it to have been a little bit easier, it would have made more sense for her to have lifted the lid completely so it would stand up. But again, this lid is super heavy. How did she do it? And if she did lift the lid, if she did jump back into the water, again, this is an 8-foot tall tank, how did she close the lid afterwards? I don't know, because they found her in the tank with the lid closed. I don't know. So then there's also the strange behavior in the elevator video. What's going on there? Also, you notice that in the elevator, she kept pressing the button to close, but it wouldn't close. So it kind of seems like something was preventing it from closing. Police and other people have theories saying that somebody was in the outside of the elevator, keeping it open so that it wouldn't close. And that would kind of make sense with how she kept poking her head out to see if the coast was clear or not. But it's a little strange. Like if someone was there, then it kind of makes sense for her to have been hiding from someone, and that's kind of a little lead there, a little bit suspicious. So the door ended up finally closing when she actually got out of the elevator. I don't know why it would close then. Like, is it some type of supernatural paranormal thing going on there that was preventing it, or was someone standing outside pressing the button to not let her, and then only letting her once she left out of the elevator? From her behavior, who was she hiding from? Very obvious that she was talking to someone. She was also partially hiding. She was peeking out of the elevator. It's almost like she was looking to see if the coast was clear to exit. But again, if someone was there and she did leave the elevator, I don't know. It's just so weird to me. It doesn't make sense. There are so many things that don't make sense with this. Okay, so let us dive into all of the theories and possible explanations as to what happened, since now we have the bajillion questions that we are probably running in our heads right now. So first off, bipolar disorder accidentally led to her accidental death. So what some people are saying is that there is a reason to believe that one of her episodes, one of her manic episodes supposedly had caused this, because they allegedly said that she went off of her medication. And this follows by some statements made by some of the other people that were staying at the hotel. So the way the hotel is laid out, there are regular single rooms, but there are also hostel-like rooms where you rent a room where multiple people are staying in it. They kind of have like hostel double beds. This and that. So apparently she was staying in one of those rooms for the first few days of her hotel room, but because she was acting a little bit strange, according to the other guests that were staying in that room, they ended up transferring her to a standard hotel room. Even with that, her being off of her medication, yes, she could be acting bizarre a little bit still, but that wouldn't explain why she or how she got into the tank. Okay, theory number 2. This one explains that she was actually being stalked and she was then murdered by these supposed stalkers. So what they think happened is that, yes, she's in LA, she traveled alone, she's in a dangerous part of town. It wouldn't be too far off or crazy to think that she might have been stalked by someone that she just met and then possibly murdered. So they ended up actually finding additional video footage afterwards of her talking and walking with 2 different men. So they don't know who these men are. So this would explain a little bit more as to how she ended up having access to the roof. Maybe one of these men were an employee at the hotel. Maybe they weren't. They could have opened the door, or maybe they could have talked to someone else to open the door to the roof access. I don't know, but it would make more sense if two men were involved and they did end up murdering her. It would make more sense as to how the lid for the water tank opened and how they left her in there, etc., etc. Third reason, theory, explanation. They're obviously considering suicide as well, considering the fact that she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and chronic depression. There is the possibility that she could have committed suicide and wanted to end her life. So she was prescribed medications to treat her mental illnesses, and she actually also did have a blog online where she would write and tell others about her struggles with taking different medications and living with bipolar disorder and depression. But there were never any indications that she wanted to commit suicide, and there was no history of any previous attempts either. So yes, she did have bipolar disorder. Yes, she did have depression, but it's not necessarily true that these people would want to commit suicide. Just because you have depression doesn't mean you want to end your life. Some people do, some people don't. And in this case, she has no history of it, so I don't see a reason as to why she would want to in this instance. This one is my favorite one because, of course, this is Heebie-Jeebies TV. It is a paranormal explanation. So what they're really saying, and this is a popular one too, if I may say, given all the facts, she's seen talking to nobody in the elevator, right? She's acting very bizarre. The elevator door won't close. Was she seeing some type of paranormal spirit? Was she possessed by something? Some people are saying that she might have been experiencing some sort of possession because in the video she's seen like flailing her arms and her wrists in very weird and unnatural ways. Again, she's talking to no one. Who is there? I don't know. And also, it is very, very interesting about all of the history that this hotel has of different types of suicides and murders. And actually, a lot of people have reported that the hotel is haunted as well. People have reported different experiences of being choked, being pushed, seeing shadows, and hearing unexplained noises. So it's not too far off either that she possibly could have been experiencing this. So let's say if she was off of her medication and she might have been in a manic episode, being in that type of situation makes you can't think, you're very uneasy, you're very jumpy, you can be hostile as well. So if she was experiencing something paranormal, even for someone who does not suffer from a mental illness, if you are of sound mind at the moment and experiencing something paranormal, that is scary, okay? It's scary. You freeze, you feel cold to the bone, and you don't know how to act, right? So imagine if someone who is having a manic episode at the moment, they're experiencing this, of course they're going to act bizarre. Very, very strange. But the fact that other people have had experiences of paranormal activity, like being choked and seeing shadows and the noises, that kind of puts up red flags for me, if I may say. Okay, Heebie-Jeepsters, that is the ending of this video. I do hope you enjoyed it because it is, again, one of the very mysterious cases that have happened in both Canada and America. It is very widely known in North America. If you aren't familiar, there's also actually a docuseries or a documentary that is going to be coming up on Netflix very soon, so very intriguing. Go watch that, watch our video. If you liked it, comment, like, subscribe, and then come back to the next video of Heebie-Jeebies TV. Bye, take care.